And I am extremely happy and thrilled to welcome now Deputy Mayor Cllr Asher Craig from Bristol City Council to give us actually an illustration of how that looks like, what that looks like sort of as a case study. And I think I don't envy the political leaders of local authorities at the moment having to suddenly react at speed. And yet I think there is a lot of inspiration to be drawn from this, and that the topic that Xavi raised, that this crisis is also an opportunity, I think may be demonstrated by the next account. So thank you very much, Xavi, for your participation, and welcome, Asher. I will let you share your screen so you can take us through your presentation. Asher, you are muted at the moment. You are, fantastic, there you go.
Hi. Firstly, thank you very much, Ishmael, for inviting me to be part of this BookingLive webinar. And thank you very much, Javier, for your introduction. I was making lots and lots of notes as you were writing. So one of the things that I will say is that I'm really proud of the fact that Bristol is not an inward-facing city. We are an outward-facing city, and I think over the last 4 years, our Mayor Marvin Rees has really put Bristol on the map globally. And I am very proud of the fact that I think we were one of the first local authorities in the world to actually undertake our own voluntary review into the SDGs. You may have seen that. And the SDGs are what underpins everything that we do in the city across all of our partners, including the local authority. So we just published our statement of intent on the recovery of the city. And again, it's embedded in the SDGs, and that is what is going to kind of drive us forward in terms of the recovery agenda. But I'm here today to kind of talk to you guys about what we have done in Bristol. And just before I go into the presentation, I just want to quickly set the context. It's been quite a strange experience actually having to go from normal, what is now the new normal, but I have to take my hat off to our city and our partners of how quickly we actually adapted. And I think the reason why we have been so successful in the way in which we have responded to the COVID-19 outbreak is because of all of the work that we had done around the One City approach and the One City plan. The last 2.5 years, we have been developing and working hard on the partnerships and the relationships that we have across the business sector, the public sector, and the voluntary and community sector. And it stood us in good stead when we stood up Gold Command, Silver Command, and we just got into action. And it also said a lot about the trust as politicians that we also had for our own senior leadership team, who, you know, sometimes decisions had to be made and decisions can't, you know, haven't got time to necessarily have that conflab or use the processes that we have within the local authority. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned about as we look at the new normal, and we're looking at that at this moment. So I wanted to set the context as to how great, how we started. So my screen is disabled. Wanting to share mine, could you? Okay, just about to. Okay, great. There we go. And slideshow. Right, okay. So how did Bristol transform our digital response to COVID-19? Well, first and foremost, we needed to think about how we were going to communicate with the city. I've got the enviable responsibility of leading on both communities, equalities and public health. So I was very much at the coalface of everything that had been happening, and having to work extremely quickly and efficiently with our Director of Public Health and the Mayor in terms of getting information out of the door. So part of that involved weekly press conferences and radio phone-ins by the Mayor and our Director of Public Health. We have been producing citizens' newsletters that have been sent out twice a week to communicate the key public health messages and sources of support that were available. We also have something called the We Are Bristol helpline, and we've had nearly 14,000 calls have been completed in relation to that service. So anybody from across the city could phone in if they needed help with shopping, if they needed help with food, isolation, you name it, we provided it. We also provided, up until this week, weekly briefings and webinars with all of our city leaders as part of our One City approach, businesses, and that includes not just the usual suspects, but one of the things that we have done is started to have conversations, particularly with those businesses who have been really impacted. You know, the food businesses, the events, arts and festivals, and they have been so successful that they want us to kind of continue going forward, because they really feel now that they're very much a part of the city and involved in the decision making and the work going forward. We also have facilitated weekly webinars with the voluntary community sector as well. Okay, I missed a volunteer response. So one of the things that was really helpful for us is that we had something called Can Do Bristol, which is an online digital volunteering platform. And when we started, before COVID hit, we had maybe about, I don't know, 500-600 people registered on the platform. We haven't really done a great job of kind of marketing it. But as soon as this kicked in, we had to find a way in which we were going to mobilize the volunteering effort that just literally exploded overnight in the city. It felt like hundreds of mutual aid support groups that had been set up just by local residents in local neighborhoods. And we had to look at ways in which we were going to safeguard, because as much as we wanted to embrace what was happening in local communities, we also had to make sure that those who might use those mutual aid online groups as a means to kind of undermine or take advantage of older residents, etc. So we put out a call and we asked all of the volunteers who were part of both the mutual aid movement as well as just the whole city that if they were interested in helping, then they should sign on to the platform. And literally, like within 24 hours, I think 3,000 people were added, and within a week, we now have nearly 9,000 people who are actually registered on the Can Do Bristol website. These are 9,000 people who are not ordinarily have any kind of relationship with the local authority or the city, other than through the kindness that they had expressed. So through that, we've delivered over nearly 5,000 volunteer actions, which include calls and visits made by offenders, shopping trips, prescription collections, dog walks. We also set up 22 community hubs to coordinate and support those activities, and those were distributed across the whole of the city. So I think every ward in the city had a hub, and the volunteers could actually relate to that. And in those areas where we didn't have a hub, we were using maybe our library buildings, because there are some areas where there is no community infrastructure in place. In terms of democracy, so that was a new one, and it took a little time. So at least for the first couple of months, we were having no online full council or cabinet meetings or planning meetings or anything like that, because we had to wait on government to pass the legislation to allow that to happen. But that didn't stop us as a cabinet. We were consistently meeting anyway prior informal cabinet meetings to ensure that the city was ticking over. But since then, we've held over 43 public council meetings that have taken place by Zoom, and we've been using the broadcast live. The public are able to ask questions and statements. In fact, we had full council last night and we had quite a heavy agenda. A couple of technical hitches, but people managed to get in. We also have something called the City Gathering, where twice a year we bring together all of our city partners. And obviously this was the first time we had used the Zoom technology, and it was a phenomenal success. In fact, a lot of people said that they felt it was one of the best ones that we did. And we had the Bishop of Bristol speaking at that event, historian David Olusoga, who happens to be a Bristol resident. And we also had Lord Bob Kerslake speaking to us about economy and recovery and what that's going to look like going forward. Social media has been like a Bible. It's been, we've needed that, and we use that relentlessly. And so we have regular video updates from the mayor. He holds a fortnightly Facebook Live Q&A for up to an hour. We've delivered a number of video and social media campaigns, staying at home around domestic violence. We Are Bristol, City of Hope, and that was in response to the rise in race hate crimes that were happening in the city. And again, Are You OK? A safeguarding campaign that we set up to encourage people to check on their loved ones and make sure that people who may be living at home and are isolated are being looked after. So very clear messaging using all of the platforms that we have to get our message across. Tackling digital exclusion was another biggie, because obviously one of the issues, particularly from older generation, in the conversations that we were having with the volunteering community sector, clearly there are communities in the city who are not who we make assumptions that everybody is digitally included, but they're not. And particularly migrant and refugee communities, some Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, people who are living in kind of overcrowded, you know, a lot of people who are some of those frontline workers who have been on the front line kind of helping to fight the pandemic. So we had to find a different way in which we could also be as inclusive as we aim to be as a city. So we made sure that we wrote to every single one of our Bristol City Council tenants so that we could explain and provide information about what they needed to do around social distancing and how to get in contact with the council during COVID. We worked with the Muslim Strategic Leaders Group, a Somali community forum, and we produced a range of multilingual posters for businesses around social distancing, because we were having problems with some communities not really adhering to that. And instead of using the heavy arm of the police to get that resolved, for us it was really about information and going out and having those conversations, and that quickly turned around as soon as we put that into place. We also kept open our citizen service point in the city centre to allow any emergency cases to come in, obviously adhering to social distancing, washing hands, etc. And then finally, we worked with the Bristol Older People's Forum to co-produce a printed bulletin for older residents, and that went out to about 4,000 or 5,000 residents, and we will continue to do that going forward. I'm ending the screen share now, but I just wanted, before I end, do I have any more time, Ishmael? 2 minutes?
Yes, you've got about 3 minutes.
Oh, good. Okay. So what I didn't put on screen, and again, it was because when Xavier was speaking, I thought, oh, I've forgotten to write this down. So I'm going to tell you what else we did. We've done a phenomenal job in moving all of our library services online. You can do online storytelling. We've got virtual book clubs. We have seen, I think, triple the amount of ebooks and e-audio that has been downloaded from the site. been a phenomenal uplift in membership. So whereas I think library membership had just, you know, steady state, we've seen a huge uplift in the number of new library members. And as we phase the opening, we are still retaining a lot of the online resources that we have there. We also created a new online platform around active travel. So in order for citizens to actually, a lot of people are getting quite frustrated about social distancing in their local neighborhoods and making sure that we put the appropriate measures in place. And so we have created an online digital map and platform, and local citizens can kind of put in their ideas about which roads and which streets that they think should be social, you know, be addressed. Obviously, the caveat is not everything you want you're going to get, because we obviously have to make sure that whatever is being put forward doesn't have unintended consequences, but it gives the citizens an opportunity to also be heard and for us to kind of consider what they need. We also are now about to launch a new deliberative democracy process. So we are going to be delivering online surveys, focus groups, and it will culminate in a citizens' assembly, no doubt online, depends on where we are towards the end of the year. And we are going to use this process over the next 6 months to feed into the recovery planning process. So even though we're going to be producing the recovery plan in September, we delivered a statement of intent, but this process will feed into the economy board, which is leading on the recovery process, so that they can also hear the voices of members of the public about what they see are their priorities about recovery going forward. And I know that this is a newbie for many, because I've been talking to other local authorities who haven't even thought about that. But for me, it has, as someone who leads on communities, it's really important that what we do up here, it has to relate to our citizens and people on the ground. The communities want to play their role, whether that's individually, in communities, in local neighborhoods. You know, how do we enable local citizens to deliver on the high level objectives that we've set out for ourselves in our One City plan? And this is an opportunity for us to kill quite a few birds with one stone through this recovery process. And then finally, we've also just we have an award-winning leadership program called Stepping Up, which we set up specifically to increase the number of Black, Asian and minority ethnic senior leaders across the whole city. And we quickly had to, we're now on cohort 3, and we have now devised an amazing online, virtual online learning platform that we will also plan to roll out to other local authorities. A lot more I could say, a lot going on, but it just kind of gives you a flavour that it's local authorities who are at the coalface. We're the ones, it's place-based leadership that is going to get us out of this situation, and hopefully government may or may not kind of give us the reins and the resources to enable us to just get on and do what we need to do, as we have done already. There you have it. Thank you.